because we do not record prayers, but for anyone who wants to join the Bible study portion, we do record that. And I will share my screen so that you can all see the readings that we have. This is our last week of doing lectionary readings before we will switch over to reading an epistle. And this is also your last chance if you would like. Those ones that we had looked at were Galatians, James, and Philippians, and we can circle back to that at the end. Those were the ones that people seemed most interested in. But for today, our readings are the Old Testament reading from Genesis, which is the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the Psalm, which is why it is better to confess our sins than hold on to them, the epistle from Romans, sin came through Adam and grace comes through Jesus, or the gospel where Jesus is tempted in the desert. Anyone feeling drawn to any of those readings?
I like the gospel one where Jesus was tempted.
That works for me.
I always like doing the gospel ones.
Yeah, it never hurts to read more of the gospel, I think. Can I ask someone to please go ahead and read that passage, either the version that's on the screen or a version that is in your own Bible?
I'll give it a shot again.
All right.
You pick it up if I screw up.
I can do that.
I'll let you know if you screw up.
Jackie will definitely let you know.
Okay, this is from NIV. Jesus is tested in the wilderness. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand up on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God," he said, "throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you will bow down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Then the devil left him, and the angels came and attended him.
Thank you.
Thanks. Keep on that close.
I was to say, I have patches. What happened here is like Jakey's my best daughter.
So obviously, very, very appropriate for the season of Lent. This reading is for our first Sunday in the season of Lent. Jesus fasts for 40 days and 40 nights, which we are all about to do in some form or fashion. Any thoughts on this passage?
For me, I just think I know he's, excuse me, God and man. But the fact that he was weak and tired and hungry, and he got tempted, and he was able to, how can I put it, to resist the devil.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just men, and if he was able to do it, we can do it on a manly thing too. And it's a good role model for me for that part, the men part of it.
Absolutely. I think often Christianity has focused on that Jesus saved us through his death on the cross. And so we only focus on the death. But I think there is so much that we can learn from the incarnation of Jesus, the way he lived his life. And this is one of those times as we're saved by the example that he gives us. That's the different ways that people believe Jesus saved them are called atonement theories. And there's one theory that is that basically by example, Jesus saved us. And so that's one thing that is going on here.
It's
One thing
interesting.
that,
Go ahead,
go ahead.
Nancy.
Well,
No,
one thing that was interesting was the last temptation where he went up to the mountain and he says, "All of this is yours, would be yours if you worship me." Well, it's already all his.
Mhm.
Right.
It
Good
was like
point.
it was already his. He didn't have to worship Satan to get it because it was his anyway. I just thought it was humorous.
no, but he was offering him an easy way out. He was offering the way of power, the way of seizing power instead of doing what he had to do was live a life of service, live a life of servanthood, and then face the cross because of the fact the way the world reacted to him. This was a shortcut. All of these were shortcuts.
Mhm.
They were so and they were all under the well, the first two were if you are, you know, who you say you are. If you are, then prove it and prove it by acts of power. And
Right.
Jesus' ministry was all about proving it by acts of service and love. So he rejected that temptation, even when he was at his weakest. He was able to reject the temptation to do things not God's way, but the world's way. So yeah, so I really like this passage. What were you going to say?
I was just going to I absolutely agree, David. One thing I was going to add in a similar vein is that the way that God leads is sometimes very frustrating because God gives us free will. And so I think this way that the devil is suggesting is leading and taking away that free will. It's a different kind of power. Um, and that is not the God that we believe in, that would do things for us. We have the ability to make choices of our own, and Jesus also had that ability in this passage.
It's interesting that the tempter, he was making his approach using scripture, and Jesus responded using scripture, three scriptures from Deuteronomy. So we got a Bible battle going on here. But anyway, and I think Jesus kind of pointed to the fact that, don't tempt the Lord your God, that the Bible can be used, weaponized
Mm-hmm.
to prove or make us feel better about ourselves to accomplish what we want. But that's not what the Bible's all about. And outside of the Bible, it's not just the words of the Bible, but it's the overall message of the Bible that God brings us to, and that's what we need to hold to and use the Bible as a tool, not as a weapon to accomplish our own means or harm other people.
Right. Yeah, because that never happens today, where people use the Bible to out of context to try to hurt other
Never,
people.
ever.
I mean, it's written in English, so we're good. Like, we know exactly what it says.
Mm-hmm. What is it? Jesus wrote the Bible in English, so we shouldn't have had the Super Bowl halftime show in Spanish.
Yep.
Oh, I like that.
Oh, you haven't heard that? Yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember who was the person
Well,
who
I,
said
I
that.
don't remember who said it, but yeah, that was
Yeah,
a direct quote and not a joke when it was said.
We used to joke about that. Yeah, if the King James was good enough for Paul and Silas, it's good enough for us. So, but yeah,
I like too where the one part was that Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only."
Mm-hmm.
That if we worship God and serve him, there's nothing the devil can do to us. I mean, as long as we're in with God. So, don't be afraid. Just be with God and serve him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because there is comfort in that you have all of us have the strength to stand up to even the devil. But there's also on the flip side of that, there can be some pressure in that, is that God's there all the time, and it's up to you to choose God or not.
And sometimes it's not a matter of just doing good. I'm hungry. I need food.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. I can take it. or I can get a job, can work, I can earn money, that's a lot of steps.
Mhm.
Is that necessary? I could just take that. And that's where the devil's offering this shortcut. Hey, dude, here it is. Take it. We're good. And God isn't offering the shortcut. He's not offering the easy way. He's offering the harder way and saying that it's not just to us. This is following God and finding the right way and the ways that he tempted his son. And it's not going to be easy. God never said this is going to be easy. David's acts of service and work, and what is the value in that? What are we getting out of putting in the effort to do the right way?
Yeah, I think you touch on something very important. There is kind of a classical understanding of how you determine if something is a sin. And there's three criteria. There's classically they say object, intention, circumstance. So the object is what is the thing that you have done or not done, whatever it is. And then intention, what did you mean by doing that? And then circumstance, what else is going on around there? There are certain times in life where doing something can be good versus bad.
Yeah, you're Robin Hood, or you are starved. Do you know what I mean? Versus
right,
I'm just lazy, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there is need. Need to sin sometimes. Is it still a sin when it's a need?
Right. Or like when I've done this with kids, we come up with examples like if someone's knocking and wants you to open the door. Normally, that's a very good thing. If you're in a prison and it's a prisoner who's a dangerous prisoner who's locked up, it's probably not a good thing to unlock that door. That's a very simple example of that. But yeah, so I think it's more complicated than just it's good to make bread for a hungry person. If in this example the devil is telling you to make the bread, then he's turning away from God to do it. Or yeah, there's other times in our lives where there's things. It's more gray.
Well, the loaves and fishes story is that, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, to me, that's very, but directly related to loaves and fishes, right? Everybody's hungry. All of a sudden we multiply it. Good story. This devil says do it. We don't do it. Complete opposite. Good choice. But there's those pieces.
And there's the easy way, which is the devil's way. And then there's the harder way, which is God's way. But anything worth having kind of requires some work to make it mean something to you.
Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say we can do good things, but we can do them with the wrong motivations. And if we're doing, we can be the greatest philanthropist, but if we're doing it to justify ourselves, to make ourselves look good, or even because we think we should, because God wants us to. We're not really doing them out of love, but we're doing it out of either some kind of transaction or some kind of self-justification, so that other people look at us and say, wow, he's a great guy. Look at all the money he's given away, or how he's helped people. But it's all about doing not just the right thing, but doing the right thing for the right reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, and fear of hell also not the right reason. It should be ideally we are doing these things out of love and praise for God rather than the fear that if we don't do them, we will end up going.
So you're really not Catholic anymore, huh?
I was actually, when I was in college, I was taught by a mentor of mine who, till the day she died, very faithful Irish Catholic woman, that Catholics are required to believe there is hell, but they are not required to believe there is anyone there.
Good way of putting it.
It was Sister Jacqueline, but we were told, like, if we didn't do our homework, well, you just want to go to hell. Like, I mean, it was very like, yeah.
Where were you sending her?
She had the Sister Jacqueline. Eventually, they carried her away because she was just
Yeah, I know.
Lost it.
Yeah, you paid money for that, dude.
I know.
Gosh.
There's an old story about a person who was going along a journey, and he was carrying a torch in one hand and a bucket of water in the other. And they asked him what he was doing, and he said, "I've been sent by God." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to take the torch and I'm going to burn down heaven. I'm going to take the water and I'm going to quench the fires of hell. And then God will know who will truly believe in him and follow him, because it's not based on fear of hell or the
Oh, wow. That's really
Oh,
interesting.
that's neat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's really cool.
And
that's hard to live that kind of a life. Yeah, that's really hard. We've
Mhm.
got to constantly examine our motives that way, because it's so easy to, want to do the right thing, sometimes for the wrong reasons. And I think that's what separates Christianity and how we're supposed to be reaching out and loving the world and helping the world, versus a lot of the rest of the world that does it just because they believe, well, that's the way they need to be.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's not done with love so much as people can, feed the hungry and deal with the needy, and they can do it out of a self of, that it makes me superior to them. There's a lot of ways it can happen,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's but Jesus is there, and he's gave us the example. I think here he's starting his ministry. This is right at the beginning. He's rejecting that whole thing about it's all about me in a real sense. It's not just that I'm going to prove myself, but I'm going to go live a life, an example of how I want my followers to live their lives, self-sacrificing, not self-justifying or self-aggrandizing.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, and I'll give one more bit of context on this passage. Um, we've talked before in this Bible study about how different numbers have different significance in the Bible. 40 is a big one. The other big place that 40 comes up is the 40 years that the Israelites wandered in the desert.
In the desert.
And so this is Jesus. This is his time wandering in the desert in an echo of that. And so we're kind of preparing for the Israelites were preparing to come into their promised land. Jesus is preparing us to come into the promises that God is offering us through him. So it's a lot of what you'll see, especially in Matthew, is echoes of the Israelites' journey in Exodus. So that's just another interesting layer to look at all of this through. And Jesus did a lot better in his tests than the Israelites did in theirs. They fell down on their faces quite a bit while they were out in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
I think it seems that I'm just was going to say that Matthew seems to emphasize that, because I think it has to do with his audience, who he's written his gospel specifically for, people who are probably Jewish, or people who are converted out of Judaism, and so that's why he's shaping it this way, specifically to make those comparisons between Jesus and Moses. And like you said, yeah.
We've talked about that before. This is I'm almost a little sad to go away from our lectionary, because we're in year A. We read a lot of Matthew, and so we've been getting a lot of little bits of context of what Matthew was trying to do with his gospel. But we can always decide to return to that later. I think it's interesting to see how the from when we around right after Christmas, we talked about the way he did his genealogy and the way the kings came up, and how all of those things are building. Jesus is the new King David, because it's for that Jewish audience.
Just to backtrack a quick second,
Yeah.
on the heaven and hell thing, there's a Hasidic, I just pulled it up, famous story told in Hasidic literature that addresses why did God create atheists? The master teaches the student that God created everything in the world to be appreciated, since everything is here to teach us a lesson. When clever student asks, what lesson can we learn from atheists? Why did God create them? The master responds, God created atheists to teach us the most important lesson of them all, the lesson of true compassion. You see, when an atheist performs an act of charity, visits someone who is sick, helps someone in need, and cares for the world, he is not doing so because of some religious teaching. He does not believe that God commanded him to perform this act. In fact, he does not believe in God at all, so his acts are based on an inner sense of morality. And look at the kindness he can bestow upon others simply because he feels it to be right. So it's not the fear of hell, it's not the, but it's the inner morality, which there's a bunch of things too about like, well, I said I was never religious because I don't go to church on Sunday, but I do, great deeds and stuff. But I've always liked that of what there's more than just the fear of hell or the, the promise of heaven. It's the right thing to do.
Right.
When did you get so smart?
I like
Say
that.
not from Sister Jacqueline.
And that actually reminds me of a story. I have a couple of good friends who are they're both atheists, and they for a while did the lights for a Christian conference. It was a paid gig, and they were asked to do it. And one of the organizers didn't know, or well, no, he learned that they were atheists and was always very concerned about them. And one day they were going to the store to pick up some snacks, and they asked if anybody needed anything, and he asked for a Gatorade, and they brought him back a Gatorade because it's just a nice thing to do, and just gave it to him and didn't ask for any payment. And that small act shook his faith, because how could an atheist possibly have brought me a Gatorade?
Nice.
And he didn't know what he was beside himself for the rest of the week.
Oh wow!
And it's just so funny to me that if that can shake your faith, well,
How strong was that? I used to work in a church nursery with a friend of mine who's atheist, and they eventually, because they kept inviting us to go to church and take turns, and she's like, "Oh, I'm doing that." Like, are you teaching? And we're like, no, we don't teach the kids anything. Like, we was in like little kids, and they're like, all right, kids safe? Yeah, good. All right.
Perfect.
But yeah, there's a thought on there, like,
I tend to think that a lot of atheists are atheists because they don't believe in a certain kind of God. And I don't disagree with them. I don't believe in that kind of God either. So, yeah, but yeah, I think if you take a look at I grew up with a very judgmental, condemning idea of God, and hell was always hanging over my head, and a God that was involved in some heinous acts in the past, and the things that the nation of Israel did, and I don't believe in that kind of a God either. I couldn't worship that kind of a God. It took me a long while to work through all that and realize a God of love, a God of compassion, a God of grace. That's the kind of God I can love and serve. So that was a journey for me as well. And I think a lot of atheists have never had that view of God presented to them, but they've had a very conservative religious upbringing or in contact with those kind of people. And that, why would you, in a lot of ways, other than fear, why would you want to serve a God that was that way? It was, it would be.
Yeah.
David, I had a fire and brimstone upbringing too, Baptist church. And it kind of turned me off for some time because it's the fear, always trying to instill fear in you. And now I feel like God is a loving, kind, wonderful Father. And he's with me always. And so I just, it's so nice to have this feeling as opposed to what I grew up with. So I'm very appreciative of what I've come to.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, friends, should we read one of the other passages? We've got about 15 minutes left.
Why don't we
Yeah.
read Romans? I discovered something here I hadn't thought of before. So I thought it might be fun to read Romans. Besides, I know Paul's one of your favorites. So
I do love Paul. Well, David, can I ask you to read the passage since you are excited about it?
absolutely. As sin came into the world through one man, and death came through sin, and so death spread to all because all have sinned. Sin was indeed in the world before the law, but sin is not reckoned when there is no law. Yet death exercised dominion from Adam to Moses, even over those whose sins were not like the transgression of Adam, who is a type of the one who was to come. But the free gift is not like the trespass. For if the many died through the one man's trespass, much more surely have the grace of God and the free gift and the grace of the one man, Jesus Christ, abounded for the many. And the free gift is not like the effect of the one man's sin. For the judgment following one trespass brought condemnation, but the free gift following many trespasses brings justification. If because of the one man's trespass death exercised dominion through that one, much more surely will those who receive the abundance of grace and the free gift of righteousness exercise dominion in life through Jesus Christ. Therefore, just as one man's trespass led to condemnation for all, so one man's act of righteousness leads to justification and life for all. For just as by the one man's disobedience, the many were made sinners, so by the one man's obedience, the many will be made righteous. Paul is not the easiest to read publicly because he's got so many subclauses and stuff working through that it's hard to
Yes.
read kind of in an even way. Paul is a brilliant man. And the one thing I noticed just to begin with is something quite interesting. In contemporary evangelical Christianity, and even for a long time in Judaism, there was a lot of patriarchy and there was a lot of blame placed on Eve.
Mhm.
But in this passage, Eve's not the villainess in this story. He's placing the blame on Adam, and I think there are reasons that he does this. But anyway, I just thought that that was interesting that Paul, the one that a lot of people apply to, some of the scriptures they apply to that are extremely patriarchal. But in this passage in Romans, supposedly his theological treatise, he's not blaming Eve. He's saying that if there's any blame to be placed, it's on what Adam did, because Adam was not acting out of ignorance. Adam was acting when he well knew what God had said specifically to him. But I just thought that was an interesting insight.
Yeah, that is a very interesting point. And it's especially interesting, as you say, to have Paul have said it when so often Paul is used to uh, tell women to be subservient in certain other passages, most of which are not actually Paul.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing about this passage, this is often used as justification for the concept of original sin. This is where you would get that idea from, that because Adam sinned, sin rained down to kind of to all of us. I'd be curious to know your thoughts reading this. Because Jackie, you're making a face. So were you not? How does that? What do you think of that idea that this is where that comes from?
I find it all just kind of all over the place, which I know sounds weird, but I'm not as familiar with it. But yeah, so one person does something wrong, so now we're all bad. Kind of takes that free will part out. Like Adam sinned, so now we're going to sin. But if we have free will, can we not then choose not to sin? Which I mean, I get the whole like, no, we're all gonna sin. That's where Mary was virgin of sin, you know, like,
Mhm.
um, but it's kind of like, isn't that kind of my free pass? I mean,
There's no hope. Yeah.
I mean, I know I should have made the right choice and I could have, but see, Adam made a bad choice first. He started it, you know, like,
Yeah,
The, the
I
doc,
see your
I was just going to say the doctrine of original sin of what he's talking about here is not just specific acts. It's that, at least in its most extreme form, it's the fact that within you is this sin nature in which you really can't choose the right unless God in his sovereign will reaches out and gives you the grace to save you, and then you're enabled because then you have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit instead of this sin nature that is almost a something that is something inside you that kind of almost needs to be removed is the way it's sometimes spoken
Mm.
of. And in that case, you look to extreme fundamentalists and Calvinists, and they believe literally you can do no good on your own. That you don't, well, I mean, you can. I'm not saying you can't do only bad things, but what I'm saying is you can't really do what pleases God. You can't do the right things for the right reasons. You're just utterly, completely sinful. Yeah.
Well, that brings up a very interesting question, especially paired with our other reading from today. Are our temptations internal to us because that there is something within us that we are broken because of the fall, or are they external and it's we are being tempted by some evil that is not part of our nature? And I think those are the two ideas that are being presented in our two readings.
see, and these two go well together. I mean, obviously that's the point, but
Yeah, the lectionary authors, sometimes they know
I
what
was
they're
gonna
doing.
I mean, I guess when the people sat around the table together, they picked that, but
Something I've always thought about. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
I've always wondered about original sin. Is we were taught that we were born with original sin, we've got to be saved and all. Why are we punished because Adam made a poor choice? So you're telling me because he made a poor choice, we already are all doomed with this sin? I never made sense to me.
So I can give you a couple different understandings. The classical understanding is in part comes from an ancient understanding of biology. Um, so basically, the idea was so we talk about fertility. Women were seen as the fertile ground where the entire baby was placed. And so the belief was that the baby came just from the man. And so your generations were all nested within you, all the way down forever. So we were all within Adam at that beginning. And so because Adam was touched by sin, we all through the generations are touched by this original sin. That is one classical understanding. That is, if you read Augustine, that's kind of where he will base some of his arguments on.
Okay.
I have I have a different understanding of original sin that you can take or leave. I view original sin more as societal sin. We are born into culture, both locally and in our countries, and our races and our gender expectations. All of these things that sometimes they benefit us, sometimes they go against us, but they're so large and so established in the world that we don't have any control over them. So a baby cannot be racist, but a baby that is born in a wealthy white home can have certain advantages that are good for them but bad for someone else. So they're born into this sinful system. And that's kind of how I view original sin, in a way that it makes sense to me. And it's not things that we have done, but it's things we're born into.
circumstantial.
I think Paul's talking about something specific here. He's talking about death in terms of what happened through Adam. I don't think I think you have to work hard to get this particular passage to talk about original sin in the sense that, a proclivity to always sin. I agree with your interpretation. That's where I've come to as well, Brian. I think it's the original sin is basically the fact that all of us live in a society. But I
Mhm.
think Paul's specifically talking about one thing, and that's the death that resulted, the separation between Adam and God, and the fact
That's
that
another,
because of that
yes.
separation, we are too separated, and Jesus was able to heal that separation. Whether that separation comes from God's side or the separation comes from our side, because we don't really understand the true nature of God anymore. But yeah, so
Yes, thank you, David. And that is a third understanding of the idea of original sin is our rift between God, where we were we were with God, walking around the garden together. God was present with us, and I had a professor in seminary who said that the entire story of the Bible is humans trying to repair that rift with God, and get back to that point where we started.
Another thing with the original sin thing, I was taught that if a baby was to die before it was baptized, it couldn't go to heaven. It would go to limbo. Baby
Because the
didn't
baby
do a
sinned.
darn thing wrong. Why can't it go to heaven? But we had original sin in it, so he can't go. And that's just wow.
So this is one of those problems that you end up with when you try to say that you understand God well enough that you have specific rules on how God works.
Mhm.
And then you end
Yeah.
up with that doesn't you if you say God must have this very rigid sense of justice and we know how it all works. And but then someone says, but what about babies? And then you wrap around and you try to come up with an exception that sounds like the God that you believe in, but and so I think it's over. I think it's a problem of over legalism of God, and I think, to be honest, none of us know specifically what our journey to heaven through the stages looked like. That's where we get into Dante's fiction.
Danny had surgery as an infant. And he was not baptized until he just really wanted to snack at Catholic school. So then we baptized him. But we were at a different church. We did laying on of hands and stuff. I guarantee Mom baptized him in the kitchen sink.
Oh, I'm sure she did.
And either she did or she had Father Vineco or somebody over baptizing him, which I couldn't care less about.
I'm sure she did.
But he was an infant and he had surgery. He did not do anything wrong. Um, the concept of that and the concept of this, and then you get baptized, and then you get tempted and sin again. So you got to work on it. But if you just get baptized now and donate a little money to our church, we'll do this, and then you're good. It doesn't flow in my mind. Like, not to discount what baptism is, but that's not what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, baptism is a beautiful thing. It's not a, well, this baby, they're going to go to hell. So let's just, no, that's discounting what the whole point is.
So I think part of the reason I brought up that this is what is used often as part of the understanding of original sin is to say that even Paul is not telling us specifically you must do this, or you end up in this place. That Paul doesn't pretend to know all of the details. Paul tells us Adam, standing in for all of humanity, was in sin and died. And we, because we are all like Adam, end up dying. But because Jesus came, Jesus repairs what was broken and brings us all to new life in a general sense. But Paul doesn't get into these are the words you have to say. This is the specific thing that you have to do. He gets into some specific words at other times, but I don't think that's what he's doing here. And I think sorry, go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say Paul is right at the beginning here, and he's trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the first kind of theologian that we see, and he's just trying to figure it all out on the fly. And I think a lot of things that Paul says are more specifically regarding specific churches, and beyond that, what's determined as theology is something he's trying to work out for specific situations. I don't think he thinks he's writing theology. And the fact is, he's just feeling it out as he's going along. He was well trained as a Jewish scholar, but it's a new thing. He's trying to, and he's really trying to kind of by himself, trying to figure out, as were the other apostles, and there were some conflicts involved in that. But yeah, so I think you see religion evolves, and I heard John Crossan say something one thing that basically I read in a book that he says that God reveals himself as gracious and loving. And then the rest of the Bible, you see people in organized religion trying to ameliorate that a little bit. They're trying to contain it, put rules on it, so it makes more sense to them because they didn't fully understand what God was like, but they couldn't accept the fact that God could be as loving and gracious as we believe a lot of us believe him to be, because that was totally out of the context that they were in, their civilization, the way they viewed God. So it's an interesting process, and Paul is in process. But I think I can be comfortable to say in this Episcopalian setting that perhaps the evolutionary understanding of God is still continuing beyond Paul and beyond the New Testament, that as we learn different things, we learn more and more about God, and we're able to understand his loving and gracious nature even more than perhaps Paul was even able to understand.
And that is why we say that it is scripture, reason, and tradition, and not just scripture alone, because we continue to learn through the shared experience across the generations and our personal experiences.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, it is just after 2:00. We had conversation that was going pretty lively, so we went a few minutes over. All right. And next week we will be back with an epistle. I will have that announced by the time I send out the newsletter. If there are any final votes, I seem to remember that David was in favor of James, which, because I remembered, that was not surprising to me. And then I remember someone else said Galatians and someone said Philippians. As I think, Tom, you were interested in Galatians, which was about Gentile Christians following Jewish law.
Yeah.
And then James is about acting out your faith. And then the pitch I gave for Philippians, it's a little harder to distill that down to one topic, but the piece I pulled out is that we are citizens of heaven, not of the world.
I think I'm going to vote for James.
I don't know how long I had to beat her to get her to say that.
No, I've been thinking about it. It was between Philippians and James, but I was thinking because of the tenor or whatever of tenor of Lent, I was thinking James was, when we're talking about Philippians, you're talking about joy and happiness and more things, and that's not really the tenor of Lent. So
and James is certainly not a happy-go-lucky letter.
I made a recommendation, but I'm happy with any of the three. Yeah,
me too. I really don't have a.
Well, let's let's go ahead and read James then.
Sounds good.
I guess the theme of our Bible study over the next 6 weeks is woe to the rich.
You know.
I feel lucky.
Well, woe to the unrepentant or self-centered rich, I guess. Let's not go too far. Let's not go too far here.
I'm pretty sure he does say directly woe to the rich.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
But yes, within context.
because Martin Luther was a big fan of James, so we're firmly in the Protestant tradition here. I'm joking. Martin Luther famously was not a big fan of James. He said it was straw, but anyway.
Excuse me.
I'm signing off. I hope you all have
All right.
a great rest
Thanks.
of your day.
Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for
Enjoyed that.
okay.
Bye-bye.
See you
So
later.
glad you were able to
Bye-bye.
join.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.